Hi, I'm Richard Vague. And today we're going to talk about our belief that high inflation is over. We can now officially deem our bout of high inflation to be over, since the just reported CPI increase for May was only 0.12%, which is 1.5% annualized, and the PPI increase was negative 0.32%, or negative 3.8% annualized. Both the monthly CPI, and those are consumer prices, and PPI, those are producer prices, numbers have been moderate to benign now for 11 months. On a year-over-year basis, the increases in CPI and PPI for May were 4.1% and 1.2% respectively. When the numbers are reported next month, year-over-year inflation will almost surely fall to within the range of 3 to 3.5%, simply because the peak increase of June of last year will now be our comparison point. That's a pretty tame level, especially given all the rhetoric of concern that continues to surround the issue. To put it in context, note that inflation peaked at 8.9% in June of last year. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, our only other concerning bout of inflation in the last 50 years, it peaked at 14.6%. That was really the oil-based inflation. In retrospect, here's what happened. As you can see, inflation bounces around from month to month, but from January 2019 to April 2021, it averaged 2.1%. Then beginning in April of 2021, COVID-based supply chain disruption took it up to 7.8% on average over the next 10 months. It would likely have begun to abate from there, but in February of 2022, the invasion of Ukraine caused the price of oil, wheat, natural gas, and other commodities to skyrocket, and inflation shot up to an average of 10.1% over the next 5 months. However, by July of 2022, supply chains had been sufficiently righted and the world had somehow adequately adjusted to the disruption of the Ukraine war, and CPI and PPI plunged and have remained moderate. To put a number on it, over the last 11 months annualized, CPI has been only 3.1%, and PPI has been 0%. Notably, this improvement came at a point when interest rates were only 2%, well before the punishing 5% level they have now reached, an indication that it wasn't really the high interest rates that did the trick. Reading the headlines, you would not necessarily conclude that high inflation is behind us. You might instead believe that inflation is a still virile threat that stems from profligacy and money supply growth or government debt growth, which are two very different things, by the way, and can only be bludgeoned to its death by continued high interest rates. But we now have a database spanning some 50 to 70 years for 47 countries that together comprise 91% of the world's GDP. So examining those premises is a fairly straightforward proposition. For major developed countries, there is simply not a strong correlation between these factors and inflation. Instead, inflation most often relates to disruption in supplies, as most egregiously occurs in wars and pandemics. We're not completely out of the woods. After all, the Ukraine war, as one example, would appear to have no end, and all bets could be off if that should flare up significantly. The June number should show a marked improvement, but will not be as easy for the economy to post big inflation declines in the months after that. It will likely linger stubbornly somewhere between the range of 3 to 5%, but it'll be hard-pressed to go much higher than that, and if recent PPI trends are a reasonable harbinger, it could trend even lower over the next year, kind of as you get past a few months, we believe. In any case, there is certainly no need for the Fed to raise interest rates further and blissfully, the Fed chose not to raise rates again in its most recent meeting. After all, these high interest rates will continue to do considerable damage whether they raise them more or not, and they're already doing plenty of damage. In my view, there is now actually a case for beginning to lower rates, though in the Fed's mind that would be tantamount to letting the inflation genie come leaping back out of the box. For the rest of us, however, it might be time to quietly raise a hopeful glass to the end of this high bout of inflation. Special thanks to the Democracy Journal, that's democracyjournal.org, that published these comments as the article, "High Inflation is Officially Behind Us," and previously published our comments on inflation in January of 2022 in our article, "Wither Inflation." That's it for now. Thanks.